Greetings, ghouls, and happy haunts to you. My name's Dandy Wellington, and today we've got a great Halloween show for you. First, we'll talk to fashion historian and co-creator of the Dress podcast, Cassidy Zachary, about her historical costuming do's and don'ts for the Halloween season. I'll list my top 5 vintage Halloween tunes, then we're cooking up some fall cocktails with co-founder of 86 The Barrier's Joanna Carpenter. All this and more coming up. Honeydew, you're my little honeydew, sweeter than a bubble chew. Skies are blue when I'm near you. Halloween, the one night a year where folks in ghoulish garb and devilish duds partake in a festival of fright. Steeped in past and present iconography, Halloween revelers are just as likely to reference the Raven as Revenge of the Body Snatchers. Though this year's sinister season will be hampered ever so slightly by an international health crisis, I'm pretty sure the freaks will still come out at night. So with costumes being a defining feature of Halloween and with folks at home flexing their creative muscles, what are some rules of thumb for planning out your looks for the season? For that, we're heading to Albuquerque, New Mexico to speak with fashion historian and co-creator of the Dressed podcast, Cassidy Zachary. So Halloween's coming up, and if someone isn't gonna go dressed as Elvira or Tiger King, they might be looking to history for some inspiration. So, what are some rules of thumb or some do's or don'ts that people can keep in mind when they're celebrating the season?
Okay. So my first do is do wear a sustainably, ethically sourced costume. For instance, can your costume be rented or repurposed from things you already own? Can it be purchased secondhand from a thrift shop or maybe your favorite vintage shop? 3 of my personal favorites, which have online presences, are Guermantes Vintage, Thrilling Vintage, and Off Broadway, all of whom offer a fabulous supply of vintage and vintage-inspired costumes for all of your Halloween needs.
People are generally now thinking about vintage more in the realm of an environmental effort as much as a fashion effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And Halloween costumes are one of the largest polluters in the landfills around the world. You wear it once, you throw it away, not well made. So yeah, consider secondhand, thrifted, or making it yourself. Second, and this one is very important, it's a very important do not appropriate and or make light of another culture's institutions, ideologies, and or practices for your Halloween costume this year or ever. Instead, do go as a more generic fantastical creature, or perhaps your favorite superhero, maybe an animal or even an object. So for historical inspiration, we have to look no further than the eccentric Italian aristocrat, the Countess Marchesa Cassati, who was so fabulous and actually quite famous for her early 20th century costume parties. Here she is as the Queen of the Night in a costume designed by the Russian Ballet Russe costume designer Leon Basque. And then here she is in one of my personal favorite costumes from history. Here she is as a fountain, as designed by avant-garde haute couturier Paul Poiret. So there's really no length she wouldn't go to, Dandy, in her quest for creativity and originality and shock factor, literal shock factor. Reportedly, she once wore an electric light costume that somehow or another became entangled and almost electrocuted her. So Dandy, while I encourage your audience, an unrestrained creative pursuit of costuming excellence, perhaps risking your life should not be an option.
It's so good. That really is so good.
And actually, Cassati leads me into my third do, which is do keep your costumes animal cruelty free, which is not always achieved historically, I must say. Do not follow in the steps of Cassati and one of her more grotesque costume stunts that actually included wearing a crown of peacock feathers, beautiful, However, it was dripping with fresh chicken blood. No, let's not do that. Another costume don't is exhibited by Kate Faring Strong, who certainly presents one of the most macabre costumes in fashion history. And I say fashion history because you will notice her costume is actually in the fashionable 1880s silhouette of the period, and it's probably designer made because she was a woman of means. Strong wore this seemingly innocuous cat costume to the now famous 1883 Vanderbilt Costume Ball, which was held in New York City. Incredible costume ball. You have to look it up if you've never heard of it. So many different wonderful costumes worn to this event. However, closer inspection of Miss Strong's costume reveals that she indeed wears a taxidermied cat on her head and apparently the body of her costume. According to the New York Times, who reported extensively on the ball and its costume inhabitants, Strong's, quote, bodice is formed of rows of white cat's heads, and the headdress was a stiffened white cat's skin, the head over the forehead of the wearer, and the tail pendant behind. A blue ribbon inscribed with the word puss upon it, which hung a bell worn around the neck, completed the dress. I cannot get behind the costume. I can perhaps get behind her playful use of the word puss, but that's about it.
For the viewers at home, cats are friends, not costumes. That is thoroughly macabre, 100% macabre.
So finally, this is particularly important for this Halloween season. So if you do intend, as you mentioned, to enjoy the festivities in person, please do so at a safe social distance and mask up! By doing so, you are actually participating in what is one of the oldest costume traditions in history. I actually got this wonderful mask in Venice, where masks have been central to the annual carnival festivities and celebrations dating back to the 12th century. Masks are so central to the annual celebrations that mask makers even formed their own guild in the 15th century. And of course, masks remain synonymous with the carnival and Halloween to this very day. So mask up this Halloween. Cover your mouth. I'm actually very curious to see how people will incorporate these, historical inspirations and historical mask making into CDC guidelines this Halloween season.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Ghosts are bad, but the one that's cursed is the headless horseman. He's the worst.
The house is haunted by the echo of your last goodbye.
So shine on, harvest moon.
When skeleton in closet rattle his bones.
Whether fall is pumpkin spice season, candy corn season, or just cozy season, it's always a good time for a cocktail. So, let's jump into the kitchen with 86 The Barrier co-founder Joanna Carpenter to see what's cooking. So it's the fall season, we're trying to warm up, we're trying to get through this 2020. We've got a couple more months left.
Oh, I so agree. Everyone needs a delicious cocktail right now.
What have you got for us?
You said it. We are now in the fall season. So I have my version of a hot toddy. I love hot toddies because they're one of those drinks that there's like no rules. You can make a hot toddy as simple or as complex as you want it to be. More often than not, find a bunch of stuff in your pantry to like make a hot toddy and it will be delicious. I love the idea of just like curling up by a window with a book in a blanket and just like holding this warm, spicy, boozy thing and just treating myself to that moment because, dear Lord, we need a warm, fuzzy, spicy, boozy moment.
Yes, we do.
So the base of hot toddies can be whiskey, it can be rum, it can be Amaro, it can, if you go like a super citrusy tea-based hot toddy, you can even use gin. I've done that before. But today's blend is going to be a spiced rum, a beautiful Puerto Rican spiced rum from the Don Q distillery, and then a little bit of Amaro to bring in some herbaceousness and bitterness. We're gonna have some fresh lemon juice, and then I made a really fun syrup that again is very pantry driven, but it's a brown sugar simple syrup. I love brown sugar. I love cooking with it. I love baking with it. I love cocktails with brown sugar syrups. And I did an infusion that is basically steeped cloves, star anise, cinnamon, and black peppercorns. The black peppercorns are in there to add a little bit of a kick and also complement some of the herbaceousness of the Amaro.
How hard is it to make a syrup?
Classic sugar syrups are literally called simple syrups because they are that. So a simple syrup traditionally is equal parts sugar and warm water, sugar of your choice, and you stir to dilute it, and then it can live in your fridge for like up to 2 weeks. I tend to usually go a little heavier on the actual sugar or honey or agave. I like a little more richness, I like a little more viscosity because they add so much to the final taste and texture and aroma.
You laid out that we have spiced rum. Now, just in case you don't happen to be a rum drinker, can they substitute whiskey or bourbon in this cocktail as well?
Absolutely. And I picked rum specifically because of the flavor profile that I built. But if you're not a rum fan, find yourself a nice whiskey. If you want to get really crazy and you find like a smooth caramely single malt scotch that you want to put in your toddy, and so many people, their like mustaches are probably curling right now. Like, you can't put scotch in a cocktail. Yes, you can. Live your best life. It's 2020. So we have just over 1/4 ounce of lemon juice, and then I want to get some of the syrup in there. So this syrup, because it's so complex, I want to use a full 1/2 ounce of it. We don't want something that's too overly sweet, but you do want something that brings in the complexity of the spices that you're using.
Right.
Yes. And I did allow some of like the whole cloves and the peppercorns to fall in there because I love it. That's a personal preference. You can also filter your syrup if you don't want to have like peppercorns floating around near your teeth. Totally understandable. So far we have just over 1/4 ounce of lemon and about 1/2 ounce of our spiced syrup. So we're gonna do a 1/2 ounce of the Amaro. And then we have the rum, because duh. And we're gonna do 1 ounce of rum. So your total alcohol content in this cocktail is 1.5 ounces, right? We're gonna top this with hot water. Yeah.
And so you could do this in a mug, but you could also do this in a measuring cup if you wanted to, and then pour it all into a nice mug as well.
Totally. I mean, that's what's great about cocktails at home, is that like nobody gets to tell you what to do. Nobody puts baby in a corner. So you can literally, you can make this however you want to make this. And then just the final thing is we want like a lovely cinnamon stick to drop in as a garnish, because you gotta have a garnish, right? And that is our hot toddy. Cheers.
Well, that's our show, and what are you doing for Halloween? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, hit that bell so you can get notifications. My name's Dandy Wellington, and have a safe Halloween season. Thank you to my patrons.
I yearn for you. I hope, I pray that you'll love me to my honeydew. I'd cross the ocean blue for my baby honeydew, honeydew of mine, honeydew of mine.